call the meeting to order. I want to begin by welcoming you all tonight to a regularly scheduled meeting of Council. We have two special groups. We have lots of wonderful people in the audience, but two special groups that were invited tonight or otherwise came by. I want to begin by introducing the Coquitlam Youth Council. We have 28 members of the Coquitlam Youth Council here tonight, and perhaps they could all stand up and we'd acknowledge the Coquitlam Youth Council. These young people do great work in our community. They are tremendously involved, and they had lots of questions as we kind of toured them around before council meeting. And I guess the main question they had is how they can be more involved, and that's great to hear from our young people. Thank you very much for coming out today and for watching what promises to be an incredibly stimulating council meeting. Yeah, I found it funny too. Okay, thank you. And also, actually, we'll go straight to Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first item this evening is a presentation, and this is to recognize the participants in the 2011 BC Games. And we have a small presentation, and I believe that Your Worship has some speaking notes on that.
Indeed. On behalf of Council and the City of Coquitlam, it gives me great pleasure to congratulate those Coquitlam residents who participated in the 2011 BC Senior Games. This year's games were held in the West Kootenay towns of Castlegar, Trail, and Nelson from August 16th to 20th, and they saw approximately 3,500 participants aged 55 plus from all over the province. Several dozen Coquitlam residents and pavilion members were part of the Fraser Valley Zone 3 team, which came in first place overall with 140 gold medals, 104 silver medals, and 63 bronze medals for a grand total of 307 medals. They really brought home the medal to Coquitlam. We'd like to applaud the efforts of our participants at the games, whether they won a medal or not. They are champions for working hard to achieve their goals. Their commitment to active living makes them all leaders in action and contributes to making Coquitlam a healthier community. We encourage them all to continue moving towards their goals of self-improvement and personal wellness. Many of our participants encourage others to get involved in the BC Games or to get more active in retirement. For many retired people, the BC Senior Games is a first step to competing provincially. The social aspect and camaraderie is one of the game's benefits, and most participants encourage others to try, if only because it's fun. The City of Coquitlam will continue to support the efforts of our residents of all ages to stay active and healthy, and we congratulate them all again on their achievements. And if there are any I know there are Senior Games athletes here tonight, we'd ask that you please stand. We can recognize you for your outstanding achievements. There they are. 1, 2. Stay standing. Okay, I see 5, and I'm going to ask all of them. I'm going to ask you all to come forward, please. Council would like. We have a photography here, and they're setting up a. You have to. It was part of the deal. Come on down, please. Hurry up. We're going to get a photo. Everybody, want Council to get up? Council, would you like to join us? We'll do it. Well, the clerk wanted to. The clerk wanted to. Okay.
You want us? What?
Okay. Good. Now the athletes. Come on in. In front. We actually had several dozen participants out of Coquitlam, and we're so gracious. We're glad that those were able to come tonight. And we certainly look forward to seeing you all participate at next year's games, hosted by Burnaby in 2012, and then about 4 years later, when Coquitlam hosts them. Or such is the hope. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Item 2 is a second presentation of the evening. I'd like to invite Mr. Dave Duncan to come forward, who's with the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure, and he's here to speak on the Premium Carrier Program. While Mr. Duncan walks up, we have a few words of introduction by our General Manager of Engineering and Public Works.
And thank you, Your Worship. Earlier this year, this past summer, hello, Dave, the province awarded the City of Coquitlam a Premium Carrier designation. The province recognizes excellence in motor carrier practices. Coquitlam is the first city, to our knowledge, to have been granted this external recognition, and we're quite thrilled. It's a testament to the best safety practices that our operators, maintainers, supervisors, and council has supported. And just by way of further introduction, we have Fred Hendy, Fleet Superintendent, in the audience, as well as Ken Landgraf from CUPE. Thank you, Your Worship.
Mr. Duncan.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council members, for the opportunity to be here today. Thanks for the kind introduction, Bill. As Bill said, I'm here today with the great pleasure on behalf of the province of recognizing Coquitlam's entry into the province of BC's Premium Carrier Program. Not only is Coquitlam the first municipality whose heavy vehicle fleet joins the Premium Carrier Program, Coquitlam is only the fifth fleet in the entire province to enter the program, and that's something we're very, very excited about, and really pleased to see Coquitlam be a part of the program. Premium Carrier Program was announced in 2010. It was one of the key recommendations that came from the Truck Compliance Advisory Panel that was established by the province in 2009. The goal of the panel was to make recommendations to establish programs and make changes to significantly improve commercial safety for trucks across the province. And the Premium Carrier Program, which is a program designed to encourage high-quality truck fleets to improve their performance and to benefit from a reputation perspective, as well as to benefit with their clients and their members from participation in the program. It's not easy to become an entrant into the Premium Carrier Program. Not only do you have to have the highest national safety code rating possible, you also have to have the highest ICBC rating in terms of premium reductions. You also, in addition to those two things, have to have a very high standing with WorkSafe BC under their BC safety records. So it's a very tough test to meet, and I think that's a testament to the fact that only 5 carriers in the entire province to date have had the benefit of participating in the program. So it's with great pleasure today that I'm here to present Coquitlam with a certificate of membership in the Premium Carrier Program. And Mayor and council members, if any of you want to come forward, I'm happy to present this to you.
I'm going to ask the chair of our engineering, perhaps, if you want to head on over. Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
And we do have some staff who would like to come forward as well. Mr. Landgraf, Mr. Hendy, and Mr. Suzak.
And on behalf of council, I want to acknowledge the entire team, certainly the staff, but our QP members, our operators that really go a long way to make sure that our fleet is safe. That's outstanding. Thank you very much.
Item 3 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, October 3rd. The recommendation is to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 4 is the minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting of Monday, October 3rd. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
First item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns final reading of zoning amendment bylaw 4224. This is a development permit authorization for the Ridgemont, which is a 195-unit, 28-story mixed-use development at 3007 Glen Drive. Recommendations to give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4224 and approve the signing and sealing of the DP by the mayor and city clerk.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I do appreciate the adaptable units that are being put in here, as well as the commercial unit ownership, and I quite like the project. I'm curious about when do we know when construction is going to begin? Do we have any idea?
Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, I was just wondering that myself. Well, with this step here, this will, if council supports it, will then issue the development permit, and that enables them to get the building permit in. It's probably in for review right now, and with a project of this magnitude, that takes a little while to process the building permit. So I would imagine construction would start early in the new year. But if you want a more definitive answer, I can make note of that, and we'll check with the applicant and get back to council shortly on that.
That would be helpful. I'm also wondering about pile driving, and you know, we've been trying to deal with that issue, and this one I suspect will involve some pile driving, and want to know where we're at with that and how we're going to communicate that to the residents who currently live in the area.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, on the pile driving, it has been a problem on occasion with some of the projects in the city center area. We are, actually, our building permits staff are in the process of preparing a report that's looking at sort of best practices around that and some of the methods of alternative pile driving that's a little less noisy. And that will be coming forward in the next month or so to council. But part of it is, on some sites, it is unavoidable that there will be the need to drive piles to support this sort of structure. So then it's a matter of the hours they do that and giving good notification to people around, and for the proponent to provide a point of contact for information. So that's some of the thoughts we're behind, sort of like a good neighbor policy and program for pile driving in city center.
Because I'd like to see that come forward as part of this, as this project moves forward, should council support it, that we keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no other speakers? Okay, the motion is fourth and final reading. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item concerns a development permit authorization for a 91-unit townhouse development at 3460 Galloway Avenue. The recommendation from the Land Use Committee is that Council approve the signing and sealing of this DP and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee meeting of Monday, October 3rd. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
First item of business arising out of that committee's meeting pertains to event tourism. It's the Celebrate Coquitlam strategy. The recommendation from the committee is that Council approve the Celebrate Coquitlam strategy as outlined in the report. It directs staff to develop an action plan for each strategy and refer any financial items from the strategy to the 2012 budget process.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Nope, it's Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. Well, I've been advocating for an events tourism strategy for quite some time. The process we went through to bring this strategy to this stage has been very rewarding. We had a joint council staff committee led quite ably by Josie Chubak that embraced the concept and came up with the strategy we're voting on tonight. We held a forum here at City Hall and invited 50 people, all movers and shakers who plan and host events in Coquitlam. They included representatives from the Festival Planner Network, Coquitlam Field Sport Association, Sports Centre User Group Association, Art and Culture Advisory Committee, Sport Council, School District 43 and Douglas College, hotel representatives, private tour operators, and of course our Chamber of Commerce. And as you can see, it was a comprehensive group. They were all excited and enthused that the city would take the lead in streamlining and making it easier to host large events in Coquitlam. They were unanimous, however, in cautioning the city not to go down this road if we're not serious about this strategy. In other words, don't do this if you're not prepared to see this through and commit resources to it. And I think that's good advice. When big events come to town, people stay in our hotels, eat in our restaurants, and shop in our stores. They encourage new business opportunities, and it makes our community more vibrant. We've built some amazing facilities in Coquitlam over the past few years. And with this strategy, we can use them not just for their intended use, but broaden that use to be economic drivers for the city and encourage all our residents to enjoy these wonderful facilities. I'm very excited about what we can achieve in Coquitlam if we adopt this strategy, and of course, I'll be voting yes.
I thank Councillor McDonnell, who of course is Chair of the Recreation, Sport and Culture Standing Committee. Seeing no other speakers, the motion. Councillor Reid.
I was going to speak too because I had the privilege of sitting on the working group thanks to Councillor McDonnell, and this was a real eye-opener for us. And I look at Councillor Robinson, I know we had, it was really a fun working group to start with, but it also, from a planning and development and economic development opportunities, it was really an eye-opener on the things that we have here. We actually had to take stock of what was in our city and how we could grow with what we have and what we do best. And I was really impressed with this process. I think Councillor McDonnell did a magnificent job in even bringing this forward to us, and I think we have decided that tourism and sports and all of those outdoor things that we can do in our city with not as high an infrastructure costs, I think will be very welcome to our citizens and bring us a vibrancy that we don't quite yet have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree. It's a great report. It's going to take us places. The motion is the event tourism strategy. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5.3 pertains to custodial and security review of tenant-operated city-owned buildings. The recommendation from the Standing Committee is that Council direct staff to facilitate use of the city's security and fire alarm provided by the tenants, and direct staff to continue to work with the tenants in order to find operational efficiencies in facility maintenance activities.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's a good idea, but you know, the one thing that's been brought to my attention, it's been about probably 2 years now that some of these people that are occupying our city buildings don't have no lease agreement with the city, and that's troublesome to me. The fact is that, you know, they don't know where they stand about the painting, about repairs, maintenance, and a few other things, but there's certainly you know, by now, they certainly should have a renewal when the lease expires, but it'd be every 2 years, every year, every 5 years, that they have a new lease agreement in place. It's troublesome to them and to me. The fact is that, you know, our own city buildings occupied by people that don't have no leases with the city, and I don't know why it's taking so long. I'd like to get some answers on it.
Look to Ms. McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. We agree from staff's point of view that it is very important to have contemporary agreements with all of the tenants that are occupying city-owned facility, and that is why it is a priority in our 2012 business plan. Some of the arrangements are historic. They've been in place for a number of time, and it really does require the attention of city staff and all of the organizations and boards that are in these facilities facilities to set time aside to work together to come up with modern and comprehensive agreements.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And no further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5.4 concerns the BC Summer Games and the 2016 bid preparation. The recommendation from the Standing Committee is that Council direct staff to initiate preliminary preparations in order to bid on the 2016 Summer Games, direct staff to identify a potential games champion in anticipation of the invitation to bid, direct staff to provide a comprehensive overview and evaluation of the application package, and refer costs to the 2012 budget process.
Moved by Councillor Raymer, second by Councillor Lynch. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. Well, when we hosted the Summer Games back in '91, of course, it was a huge success, and we have Percy Perry Stadium as a legacy from those games. The games attract about 3,600 participants and require about 10,000 volunteers, and it adds an estimated $2.5 million into our local economy. And this is a huge undertaking. We'll need support, of course, from our friends at the Chamber of Commerce, School District 43, and our neighbors, Port Moody and Port Coquitlam. 2016 coincides with Coquitlam's 125th birthday. And, dare I say it, the Evergreen line should be up and running by then. So, no surprise, I'll be voting yes.
Thank you very much. Yes, we'll be able to get there by SkyTrain. Wouldn't that be neat? The next speaker actually was deeply involved in the games 20 years ago, not as an athlete, maybe as an athlete, but then Mayor Sikora. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. Yeah, the fact is 1991 was our 100th birthday, and certainly we bid on the Summer Games, and then, lo and behold, we were able to bid on the Senior Games. And a lot of people said, it'll never happen, I'll never be able to work. But the people in our community came together like I've never, ever seen before. The fact is that we needed 6,500 volunteers. We got 13,000 applicants. So, you know, and I remember having a driver driving me from one place to the other because there are many functions that you have to attend. And he said, one thing that, you know, I'd like to tell you, Mayor, what's happening. And the fact is, he says, I never knew my neighbors that well. But he says, now they're personal friends of mine, because they're also driving cars and vehicles and that I get involved. So it was a great thing that united the community, and really people went out of their way to host those games. The Senior Games went well, certainly had a lot of volunteers, and certainly for the Summer Games. It was a very, very successful year for both, and I'd hope that we do get this 2016 Summer Games, because it's great for the community, it's great for our residents, and it's great to the people that really get involved. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you, Councillor Sikora. Seeing no other comments, the motion is the BC Summer Games. Let's see if we can get them. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5.5 pertains to Glen Park phasing. The recommendation from the Standing Committee is that Council approve the Phase 1 plan, which includes several key elements to provide new experiences for park users, and to authorize the expenditure of $508,379 to complete Phase 1 plan.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to see something happening at the Glen Park. I just live a matter of a block away from it, or a block and a half away from it. The fact is that, you know, the one thing is going to be a family park, Mayor, and, you know, I would like to have seen washrooms in the first phase rather than sometimes in the second phase that may be 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. You know, when the families come there to have a picnic, or the kids playing ball or whatever it is, I'm talking about the real young kids, where they're going to go to the washroom. I mean, it's, you know, a park is not really a park without the washroom. So I like to have seen we're spending $508,000, a little better than that, and I'd like to have seen washroom in there certainly for the females and males, and also where the kids can, because otherwise they'll be going in a bush, which is not a good place to go.
Okay.
So that's my comments.
There you go. Well, I agree with you about the washrooms. Any other comments? Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, the doggies have a washroom in the park. It's an off-leash area.
Okay.
Sorry, I just couldn't resist that. But I do agree with Councillor Sikora. I think that park, as it is a town centre park, actually needs a washroom. And I think we should really look to that, to adding that in the first phase. And I also want to see a water feature in there. I've mentioned a pool, which didn't get rave reviews from staff, but maybe a spray park, which I think Councillor McDonnell likes, and so I'd really want to look for a water feature. So if we have to put plumbing in, maybe let's take a peek and put that on our wish list for soon after the first phase one. Thank you.
So a spray feature other than the dog off leash area. Okay.
Definitely, definitely, yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to pursue the spray feature issue any further. But I hear from Councillor Sikora, I hear from Councillor Reid, the Mayor expressed his agreement. I don't want to delay going forward with the Glen Park Phase 1 plan. But I would move an amendment to the recommendation to add direction to staff to report back to Council at an early date on the costs and the timeline for adding a simple washroom feature to Glen Park.
Okay, an amendment moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Sikora to ask staff to report back on a timeline for washrooms. On the amendment, do you have anything further on the amendment? Councillor McDonnell on the amendment, Chair of Sport.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson, for bringing that up. I'm wondering if that would be able to be done before budget time this year.
Ms. McKay.
At this point, we can certainly report back in a timely manner, but it has not been submitted at this time as part of the 2012 budget. However, we do have a department-wide washroom plan. It's an ongoing commitment that Council has made to invest in our washroom inventory across the city. So we could perhaps report back as part of that strategy, or as a supplemental amenity at any time over the course of next year. We have had success recently in installing these tilt-up washroom features. You may recall we put one up in Victoria Park, and that was just around the $100,000 mark. So I can give a preliminary costing right now. Now that obviously doesn't include the servicing costs, but as a benchmark, $250,000 to put a washroom in is about the range that we're talking about if you do have to bring services in. Now, I am aware at that site there were some old services that were tied to the pool building. Whether those services can be repurposed or not is unknown, so there's some technical work that would need to be done to find out whether new services have to be in. So I think it's reasonable to expect that it would be 2012 before staff could be reporting back after the technical review.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion is an amendment to add a technical review and a report back. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? That amendment carries. The motion as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none. The motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Glen Park's going to get a refit. Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is fourth and final reading of Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4246. This is a laneway adjacent to 955 Austin Avenue. Recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4246.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is a fourth and final reading, and this is for the Animal Care and Control Bylaw 4240. The recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to Animal Care and Control Bylaw 4240.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Councillor McDonnell on the animal care.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this. I just wanted to point out one of the significant changes, I think, to this bylaw, and especially for the upcoming enforcement bylaw which follows this, is that we've differentiated between vicious dogs and aggressive dogs, which is a very big point when dealing with them. So I'm glad that we've made that distinction, and I'll be in favor.
Absolutely. Any further discussion? All in favor of the Animal Care and Control Bylaw. All opposed? Opposed?
I'm in favor.
Well, I said all opposed. Okay.
Watching my neighbor here.
Watch your neighbor as
Councillor-
much as you want. Matter of fact, there might be a unit for sale next to me that you can buy and move in.
Councillor Reid appears to have coerced Councillor Sikora to vote in favor of the Animal Care and Control Bylaw. So it's unanimous. All done.
Moving along quickly then. Item 8 is also a fourth and final reading. This is for Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw Amending Bylaw pertaining to animal control. This is Bylaw 4258. Recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw Amending Bylaw Animal Control 4258.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Robinson. No, Reamer. My apologies. I didn't hear who seconded it. On the Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw Amending Bylaw. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is also a fourth and final reading, and this is for our 2012 Annual Taxation Exemption Bylaw. It's Bylaw 4226. Recommendation that Council give fourth and final reading to the 2012 Annual Taxation Exemption Bylaw number 4226.
Sorry, was it you? No? Was that you? Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor McDonnell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10 is a space plan utilization for the Coquitlam City Centre Library. The recommendation is that Council receive this report for information.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is an application for a permanent change to a liquor license for a food primary establishment. This is the Urban Gate Restaurant located at 1158B, the High Street. There are three choices before Council, and also the fact that the report would be submitted as including Council's comments.
Okay, and that's because we did go out for public comment, we are allowed to comment as a council, otherwise we wouldn't be allowed to comment. Is there a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion. I would move C. We'll support the hours on to 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday only at this time, and I'd like to speak to the reasons why, Your Worship.
Okay, the motion by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Lynch to support option C, recommendation C rather, which is the modified midpoint perhaps between the offer and rejecting it. The Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Until last week, when we got notification from the mayor that actually the Evergreen line was signed, and I believe the shovel's getting closer to getting into the ground, I can hardly wait till it gets there, is the day that we actually are beginning to become a city. This will be the city. And as Doug McDonnell says, we got to have a fun city. And I agree. I absolutely and totally agree. But in the last 10 years, as we have slowly built our city and developers have come forward, and the liquor laws being what they are in Victoria, there's basically liquor primary or food primary. And about 8 or 9 years ago, the food primary business started wanting later and later hours, and some of them operate more as quasi-pubs than the pubs were. The pub business has changed drastically, and the liquor business and the restaurants have changed drastically. This is a wonderful family that owns this restaurant, and they have come here and they bring a different culture with them, and a culture that I really think that our country should welcome with open arms, and that is where when parents go out in the evening, they take the children and they have music and the children learn to dance, and it's quite a family-oriented restaurant, and I think this is wonderful. But as we have built all the high-rises around the town center, those folks with families who've moved in there also weren't aware that there was going to be this kind of entertainment and music and things going on in a restaurant. Now, I believe that in this city we have one cabaret license. We will have the casino, who I'm sure when the hotel is built in a year or two will be asking for a dine and dance restaurant of some sort. And for this downtown core now, or I have to get used to calling it city center, We're no longer town center. We're now going to be city center. We have to be able to move these businesses in, and we have to make their hours so that they're attractive for people to come out and stay in Coquitlam and not jump up and run down to Yaletown or Vancouver or wherever else they go. So we have a new economic development officer in our city, and he and I have had this discussion a while ago, and just talking about how you go about this. And one of the things we need to do, as far as I'm concerned, is take a really good look at our zoning bylaws. And so we can change the zoning bylaws and maybe get some hybrids in instead of having a cabaret license that allows a large dance floor and music and all that stuff. We could have restaurants that would allow dancing, but not on such a grand scale. We can look at the patios that we have now in Surrey. If you have a patio, an outside patio within 100 meters of residential, it's closed down by 10 p.m. So in Port Moody, they have a good neighbor policy, and they have a pub right within Newport Village, which I think is incredible development, and it closes always at midnight. Sutterbrook closes, I believe, at midnight as well. So there is things that we need to do as good neighbors, and I think this is the process that we need to walk through now. So in this case, I would like to move that we allow this extension until on Fridays and Saturdays, and that in January or February, the council that is in work more with the Economic Development Department and planning and get ready to bring in any changes that we would see fit for a fun city in our city center. And therefore, we would be telling all the developers as they develop that along with the prospectus that they give their new clients that are moving in, they give them notice of intentions that the city is also going to be having these kind of facilities in the town center core, so that people understand that this is a city center and we're not just the burbs anymore. So that is my reasoning, Your Worship, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, we're required to ask for a 7 days a week extension, and I think what we need to do is streamline all our licenses in this city. Very, very important. I see we have 1 or 2 applications a week applying for extensions and many, many other things. Karaoke's and a few other things are coming before us. I think we need to, you know, instead of spending a lot of time on these licenses and everything else, I think we need to standardize them and give them all 1 o'clock, and that's it. And if there's any problems created, then we can certainly take their license away. A business license away, very, very easy. I know when I was the mayor, I was threatened to take away the cabaret on Brunette Avenue license away. They were before council, and we were serious that we're going to remove their license. And also the one that was where the Milestones restaurant is was a cabaret, and also they were threatened to get to pull their license. But I think, you know, I know that there's people around there that'll say no, it's too long hours. They live close by there and that type of deal. But certainly there's people that want to go in somewhere within walking distance rather than driving and have a drink, watch TV, watch a football game, watch whatever it is, and then walk back to their apartment. Here's the case. What will happen now is that there's places that are open till 2 o'clock in the morning. Bars are open. And what will happen, that they'll get into their cars and go to these places rather than have them stay in this community where they're not going to be charged with impaired driving and a few other things. We need to address this as soon as possible. I mean it, because I'll tell you, we're going to have a great problem where a person has 1 or 2 drinks and the place is closed at midnight, and you know there's a lot of many people that work shifts also work until midnight. If they're going to come home and go for a drink into a bar, I'd much rather them drink in a bar where there's other people around than go home and be a lonely drinkers. Those are the ones that are the most dangerous thing for people to become alcoholics and a few other things. You know, they drink by themselves at home because there's nowhere to go. So, you know, I think we need to really probably change this because like karaoke. There's 2 or 3 places in Coquitlam that have karaoke. Nothing wrong with that. I see nothing wrong with it. They're well run, well managed, and there's no problems. So I think we need to really, really think about changing the atmosphere of what we have. We're a city. We're not a little town, where there's 5,000 people living in there. We're 125,000 people, and I think that we need to allow a little leverage. I know that Victoria is very tight with their licenses. They have the pubs with 1 license, restaurants with not a license, cabarets with not a license. I think all that needs to be streamlined. So where we know where we're at, and that's all there is to it. So I will not support only Friday night and Saturday night because I think it's wrong. I think we should be, it wasn't what he applied for. So, but we put it here for Friday and Saturday night instead of giving this council a chance to vote on 7 days or Friday and Saturday. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I gave this a great deal of thought, and certainly from the perspective of economic development, I would have liked to have been able to have granted this establishment what it was requesting. However, the feedback from the neighborhood was not positive, and as well, I think that we're wise treading somewhat cautiously in allowing the additional hours on the weekend. I will support the additional hours on the weekend, and I'll be very interested to hear how that goes. I do agree with Councillor Reid that the lines are getting very blurred between our food primary liquor licenses and our liquor primary liquor licenses. And I note here that the provincial government has said that we must take into account whether the amendment may result in the restaurant operating improperly as a liquor primary establishment. Well, it's my thought that you've got some liquor primary establishments that people are using as food primary, and you've got some food primary establishments that people are using as liquor primary. And so there's a real blurring of the lines, and that all started back in 2002 when the government allowed the establishment of our bars and grills. And I love our bars and grills, and I frequent them fairly often. And but there is a real blurring there, and the other blurring that the general public may not be aware of is the fact that where there is a blur, you've got 2 very different sets of regulations. You've got a set for liquor primary and you've got a set for food primary. And so these restaurants and bars and neighborhood pubs are not always competing on a level playing field. And so this has also created some consternation amongst these businesses. And this is something that I think we need to work with as well with our provincial government. So thank you. I am happy to support the Friday and Saturday.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Just like my colleagues have suggested, I too spent a fair bit of time going over this one. And what struck me, a lot of the folks who were not happy about this proposal talked about that they live in a residential neighborhood. And I thought, well, they do live in this neighborhood, but it's not a residential neighborhood. It's a different kind of neighborhood. It's not Eagle Ridge or Ranch Park or the Plateau, which are really clearly defined residential-only neighborhoods. This is a mixed-use neighborhood, and this is our city center. So if we are going to turn it into a vibrant place, then we ought to support its vibrancy, at least starting with a Friday and Saturday night. I also recognize that we have some young people in the audience, and I'm the parent of 2 young people, and when they want to go out, they tend not to want to go out until 10 o'clock at night. It's a weird thing that you guys have. I'm in bed and you guys go out. And I want my kids to go someplace local, because you know what? You won't be drinking until you're 19, right? But when you do, you'll want to take a cab home. And a cab from Vancouver, because SkyTrain doesn't run, is prohibitive, and it puts drinking and driving at risk. So I think that as we mature as a city, we need to recognize that we're going to need some of these establishments to meet our local needs, because you know what? A cab ride home to your residential neighborhoods is going to cost $15. not 65. So I think we need to start paying attention to those needs as well. I also think it's important that we value consistency in our city, and we have supported the keg with a Friday, Saturday, late night till 1 o'clock, and I think that's important too, that we want to support all of our local businesses, and so I'm very comfortable with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you. I think all of us have had a lot of thought and a lot of work into this item. It creates some certain issues that have come up, and I think you've heard a lot of the comments being made. We have a downtown that does not have a lot of life later in the evening. I think there was more life when I was younger, 25, 30 years ago in Coquitlam for nightlife than there is today. But how we get there and how we do that, and I think Councillor Reid pointed out some of the issues about zoning and different ways that we can deal with these things. I have a concern, though, we're talking about consistency. Are we pretty soon going to have all restaurants coming forward wanting to stay open till 1, 2 in the morning? And while that may be good for some nightlife, we have to be very careful where, I think Councillor Reid pointed out, where that is and how we do that and how we balance it out. So I think in some ways I'd like to see maybe a moratorium on any more applications. Through the clerk, I don't know if we can do that or not, until we review some of our zoning bylaws, as Councillor Reid stated, to come up with some other ideas on business licensing zoning bylaws to have a better handle on establishments that may cause problems with noise and drunkenness.
Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you. Through your worship. Yeah, I think from a process of a moratorium, because it's a provincial licensed approach, I think I'd have to do some confirmation work with that and speak to the province. I think one of the ways you would have such a moratorium, if we are not allowed not to accept applications, because I don't believe we are, because it's sent through to the province, is that we would decline them when we receive them with the idea that a policy is forthcoming.
Okay.
Now, the issue there would be you'd have applicants paying money with council having already sort of had a position, and the province says we are supposed to review each one's individually. They asked it must be considered on its own merits. So you have a little bit of a regulatory conflict there, but if you let me go back to the province, talk to them, and we'll see what some of the rules are for proceeding in a way that you've described, I can report back to council at a later time.
I would appreciate that. I think that would be helpful for council. And I would say to the applicant that's coming forward, I can support Friday and Saturdays. I think there needs to be some more life with us in this area, but I think, for the applicant, when this is granted, if it's granted, to be on notice is that you're responsible for your patrons, your people, and the noise, and your people that live within the community around you, to make sure that the impact is minimized as much as possible, and setting that standard for other ones that may come through and wanting to do the same thing. But I do think, as Councillor Reid said, we need to look at other ways of managing this, and I really support Councillor Reid on that. I will support the motion that she's moved here, but I think we have far greater issues to look at in managing these situations. And I'll agree with Councillor Reimer is that these are a great blurring of what's a restaurant, late night pub, or a pub as a restaurant. So we just don't have a good handle on that anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. Well, we knew when we sent this application out for public consultation that it was going to be setting a new bar, a new level, because, as has been noted already, we only have one restaurant that has hours that are later than 12. It's the Keg. And that was fairly recent. For us to support hours later than that throughout the week is something that we would have to have the support of our residents. And clearly the ones that have expressed an opinion, the majority of them say no, they don't want that. And I think that if we're going to take the time and the effort to ask to go out for public consultation, then we have to listen to it. And I think it's unfortunate that the restaurant is not going to be allowed to serve a liquor, but then they are a food primary restaurant, and they are not really in the entertainment business as much as they are in the restaurant business. So I think this is somewhat of a fair compromise. I think that maybe the city the residents aren't wanting it to be a downtown hub of activity of restaurants and dancing late at night, at least in this area, at least at this time. And I think that we have to consider what type of downtown we have. I mean, there are some places downtown Vancouver that are very noisy and have a lot of problems, and we have policing problems to go along with that. And I'm not saying this would happen in this restaurant, But I think we have to give a lot of thought to what type of downtown core that we're shaping and what it is that we want to be the activity. And I think that allowing a restaurant to serve alcohol till 1 on a Friday or Saturday is perfectly acceptable. And perhaps if the residents had said they were okay with it later, that we might have, as a city, said that it was acceptable. But they certainly haven't. And I think that the compromise that number C that I seconded is definitely the way that I feel most comfortable going with it this time. But I don't think that we should penalize any other restaurants that want to come forward and make an application, because they could be in a totally different area, and it would be maybe of a benefit to them and maybe of no negative impact to wherever they're located. So I think we should certainly keep an open mind to any new application, because one thing we want to do is we want to encourage businesses in the city, and we want to do what we can to make the businesses that are here to be successful. So I am going to be supporting the recommendation C.
Thank you. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I'll be supporting C as well. I know this restaurant. I've been there several times. It's a well-run family restaurant, and I wish it the best success. Councillor Reid brought up several really good points, and I hope the city manager was listening, that council here has a desire to address this issue in our work plans early in the new year. We are going to get more and more applications from restaurants and bars for later openings, and I think we need to study this whole issue. Maybe we'll be looking at things like entertainment zones like they have in other cities, or another good point you brought up, outdoor decks, which can be very problematic in our downtown core with the high density down there. So this is something that isn't going to go away. It's only going to get on our plate more and more, so I think we need to address it sooner rather than later. So I'll be supporting C, but I would like to see this council deal with this whole issue, serving all of Coquitlam, sooner rather than later.
Okay, I put myself on the list as well. This is a wonderful restaurant. I've been there. I really appreciate the owner and his family. I think they do a really good job of creating a downtown environment, and an environment that we're all trying to encourage, an environment that's quite has a lot of energy, day and night. But we've heard from residents, and that's our challenge, is when we have a lot of residents around a restaurant that applies for something like this, we ought to ask them. And we ended up with more than 100 comment sheets that were quite, a great many of them were quite pointed about their concerns about this. And it happens whenever we try to make a change after the fact. If, for example, people move into a building and there's a volleyball court out front, then no one complains about the volleyball court because they knew it was there. If there was a restaurant, pub, whatever, no one will complain about it necessarily because it was there when they moved in. But to make a change after the fact is difficult. Currently in the news is the big screen at Terry Fox Plaza downtown, and it's because it's brand new. The residents around it said, "Wait a minute, that wasn't there when we moved here," and it becomes a challenge. We also have the issue of the restaurants acting as a bar, and several council members have brought that up. And I know of perhaps a dozen restaurants in Coquitlam that they're food primary, and they're just bars. They are bars. I'm not saying that is this one. I think actually this one would probably end up being different from that. But it does create challenges when our liquor licensing rules are such that you can almost do much better as a restaurant acting as a bar than you could if you had a liquor primary license, and therefore you couldn't have children in the bar in the restaurant during the day or even during the evening. So we do have that challenge. The liquor licensing laws, Councillor Sikora raised the idea that we should streamline this. This isn't even us. This is a bunch of provincial rules. For example, last meeting, I believe it was, we had an application here for another restaurant that wanted to change their liquor licensing because they wanted to allow people to dance at a restaurant. And believe it or not, you can't dance at a restaurant unless you go to change your liquor licensing, your liquor license. And it becomes a real challenge for local governments. We can't even comment unless we subject the owner of the restaurant to a process of public consultation. We have two on the agenda tonight, and they are in different areas. One's downtown. One is in a residential building, in the basement of a or in the ground floor of a residential building, and the other one is nowhere near a residential building. And we will see, as we discuss both of these, completely different realities. And I can think of areas in our downtown core where this wouldn't pose any challenge for the residents. But we do have a bunch of residents, and they have, I believe, the right to offer their opinions, and they've offered their opinions. So we're challenged, I think, by those realities, and I'm going to have to, I'm actually tempted to vote against even the 1 o'clock, because I think we need to fix this in a different way. But I will support the 1 o'clock Friday and Saturday with the thought that we're going to find some other way to allow the province to properly manage the way we license liquor in this place, in this province, in this city, because we do want an exciting downtown core. We want a place where people can actually come and have a good time and walk home, or take SkyTrain home. And I see Councillor Nicholson is our last speaker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking last on an item like this, you'd really better have something new to say. So I'll relieve the Mayor's concerns and say that I am going to say absolutely nothing about telling the province what to do. That'll be refreshing for you. I do think that we need to look at how we manage entertainment, how we manage our new city centre core as it evolves. Councillor Robinson makes the very good point that this is not a neighbourhood like any other neighbourhood that we have. It's a mixed-use neighbourhood. It is what we want to see, I believe, in the downtown. I'll phrase it very short, very briefly, and it's a phrase that we use all the time around the city. But this can very much be the part of Coquitlam where you really do live, work, and play. And I think this kind of activity is an integral part of that. I think moving to 1 a.m. Friday, Saturday is a good step to take for today, but we need to figure out how we're going to grow the city centre into that place we can live, work, and play. Thank you.
Thank you. See no other speakers. Question is option C, or recommendation C of the staff report, a 1 a.m. Friday, Saturday extension. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. The motion carries. Councillor Reid.
Just on this item then, if it would be fair, and I'm judging from the council members that are sitting here today, that perhaps direction through to staff, to planning and economic development, that we take this under advisement sooner rather than later, because we're looking for C4 zoning, we're looking for a vibrant city centre, and I think it's very fair that we advise people moving here that that's what we're looking for. And I would like to refer this back to land use and economic development. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Just as direction.
I'll take that as, I'll ask staff to take that as direction from council. I don't see an objection. Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Item 12 is our second application for a permanent change to a liquor license for a food primary establishment. This is for Daniel's Restaurant at 2786 Barnet Highway. As before, council has a choice of A, B, or C, followed by the sending of the city clerk's report as including their comments.
I'll move C.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor...
For all the aforementioned reasons.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Option C for all the aforementioned reasons. Councillor Reid, you're done. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, we're saying that the provincial government. But, you know, there's many things we can do without the provincial government. We don't have to have the people in Victoria tell us what we can do, what we can't do. You know, unless we go to extremes. You know, I mean, you know, and this would be unfair competition to say, give this gentleman his 7 days because he's not in the residential area.
Well, we're not.
I think it would be a terrible thing to do for us. But however, you know, and we have UBCM that we can go through. I was in hotel business for many, many years, restaurant business, you name it. Spent my whole life in that business. And frankly, I'll tell you what, I had a hotel that I took over, matter of fact, in Richmond, and it had a cabaret. And the people didn't have to tell me that there was problems. I seen there was problems, and matter of fact, the second night that I took it over, I closed the cabaret down. There was, it was about half a block away from the rooms, and the people couldn't sleep in the rooms because there was so much noise. So I closed it down, very simple, right overnight. So, certainly the management has to control the business. We can't control the form, so we got to manage. And the other place that I've ran certainly have been good, and the liquor licenses that we had have been good, and I think, it's up to the management to really control it and manage the business properly. You will get owners of businesses that could care less about keeping an eye on what's happening in there. And they'll run away from you. You'll have nothing but complaints, and the city will have nothing but complaints. But in this previous application, the gentleman is there almost 24 hours a day. His whole family's involved in it, trying to make their ends meet. With our business taxes are the highest in British Columbia. They have to do something to try and survive. This gentleman, I've never been in this restaurant that's here before us, but I understand that probably the same thing applies there. So there's nothing wrong. This council could easily say to them, the pubs and the restaurants will be open till 1 o'clock in the morning. Thank you very much. I don't think for 1 minute that Victoria would have a say one way or the other, or even want to say anything in it, because it would probably be okay. But we use the excuse because we can't make our own decisions for ourselves, so we use Victoria as an excuse. I don't want to use Victoria as an excuse. I got elected here by the people to look after Coquitlam. That's all I'm interested in. I'm not interested in Port Coquitlam, Port Moody, or anywhere else. I'm interested in this city only, and the people that elected me, and that's it. And I know that, there'll always be a complaint that maybe there's a little too much noise on the patio. The owner can control that too. Nothing wrong with that. It's up to the operator to make sure that they're good to the neighborhood, and the neighborhood appreciates them being there. So I'll also be voting against this one because I think we're antiquated in our laws, and we should change it.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Reid, your microphone is on. Did you want to speak any further? Or?
Not unless you really want.
Okay.
Oh.
There you go. Councillor Reid is pushing the buttons. And I think in this case we do have to accept that. I don't think anyone's actually going to blame Victoria. I think in this case we have asked the residents in the neighborhood, and there aren't many in this neighborhood. It was a different result from the last one. The last one, we asked the residents in the neighborhood, and almost all of the residents that responded in the response that we asked for gave us negative. They didn't want it. In this one, we didn't have that response. And so I don't have as much concern here, and I think that this is a perfect example of an area pretty close to our town center, our city center, that could well support this kind of business. So I'm actually reluctant to talk about 1 a.m. I don't think it would be unfair, because we did ask. We asked the residents of the neighborhoods, both of them, and we got a completely different response. And so I'd be fine with 2 a.m. on this one, because as I say, we got a different response. Are there any other discussion to this? Seeing none. Mr. Clerk, could you read the recommendation out, please?
Sure. The motion was to support option C, which is an extension of hours to 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday evenings only, and that the report of the city clerk be forwarded to the LCLB to serve as council's comments.
Thank you. All in favor of that? All opposed? And I'm opposed, and Councillor Sikora is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 13 is a notice of motion that was introduced at the last council meeting. This concerns the establishment of a seniors advisory committee, a seniors planning committee, or seniors council. The recommendation is Council give consideration to this notice of motion, and there are a series of whereas clauses followed by be it resolved that staff look into the possibility of creating a seniors advisory committee or a seniors planning committee or a seniors council and report back to council with a recommendation. As per procedure bylaw, Councillor Reamer, as the mover of the motion, has the option to speak first.
And I'll go to Councillor Reamer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This came as a result of my participation at the Union of BC Municipalities Conference. We had a one-half-day workshop on creating age-friendly communities, and this was actually one of the recommendations that came out of that workshop. As we all know, many of us around this table, the baby boomer generation is quickly approaching our senior years. I have spoken to many seniors in the Tri-Cities, and my understanding is that there is no current table in the Tri-Cities for seniors, with the exception of an advisory committee in Port Moody. And there's actually also a very newly formed Canadian Association of Retired Persons chapter of the national chapter, which has just formed in the Tri-Cities, and they are continuing to build their membership. The importance of creating age-friendly communities is key, and for these very reasons. I do note that we currently have a Coquitlam Youth Council. Thank you all for attending tonight. And I would like to see us also form some sort of seniors council or a seniors advisory committee or a seniors planning table, something like that. So this motion really just instructs staff to look into it and to report back to us with some sort of recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mayor, you know, we have election coming up just a month away, and I don't know why we'd be discussing another committee at this particular time. You know, let's go through election. Whoever the new people that are elected can decide to do certain things. See, another thing, we're asking for advisory. What are we elected for? Not to make advice? To make decisions? Of course we are. Unless you're one of those people that can't make a decision, then you'd have a whole body, these kind of people around you. They'll tell you what to do, when to go to the bathroom, and do a lot of other things. To me, it's different. I got elected to make decisions. And whether right or wrong, I have to make a decision. And I will make a decision. And the one thing about the residents in here, if they think that I made the wrong decisions, and enough of them, they can throw me out of the office. And that's very, very simple. The taxpayers, this community, elect us to make decisions. I don't need somebody that's not elected to tell me what I should be doing as a politician that I represent the people that elected me. They elected me to make decisions. And I think that's exactly what we should be doing. So I'd propose that we table this one till after the election, Mayor.
Okay. The motion is to table. Is there a seconder? There's no seconder to the tabling motion. I'll go to the next person on the speaker's list, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I actually quite like advisory groups, because I find that even though I'm responsible for decisions, I'm responsible for making sure I have enough information to make a well-informed decision. So I actually do value all of our advisory committees. I do, however, have concerns with this one, this proposal, mostly because I think that I'm not sure that it's exactly what. I don't think we're actually operating in a vacuum in terms of an age-friendly community. We have Glen Pine and Dogwood, and they have advisory groups, or my understanding of some sort of boards, and they inform programming and all that kind of stuff. And as chair of the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee, we spend a fair bit of time talking about accessibility in the community that's related to age. So changing the development services standards for our sidewalks so that scooters and wheelchairs and those who have mobility challenges can get around, and proposing adaptable and accessible units for the development community is part of age friendly. And there certainly has been, I've pulled out from the newspaper this whole series on aging, so I do recognize that it's an important issue. I'm just not sure that that's what we ought to be doing right now. And so would also like to consider the idea of how do we pool all the information we get from Dogwood seniors, from the Glen Pine seniors who do programming, as well as some of the stuff that we have from the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee. I don't know if there's gaps in making sure that we're age-friendly, but it's not that we haven't been doing anything. We have been doing lots of things. We just haven't been under this designation. So at this point, I'm not comfortable supporting this because it's in similar vein to Councillor Sikora, it'd be really hard-pressed to start something now at the end of a term. So I'm not going to support this right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got myself on the list. I don't see it that way, actually. I read the motion quite carefully, and that staff look into the possibility of Seniors Advisory Committee and report back to Council with a recommendation. I suspect that that process would involve staff examining it for a month or two and probably coming back to the next Council after the election so that the next Council, when they appoint the advisory committees, would have the information necessary to make a prudent decision. And Councillor Robinson referred to that. And I really believe that advisory committees are about that. They're about trying to make prudent decisions. I'm elected to make decisions, but I don't make them in a vacuum. If I make them in a vacuum, I'll make the wrong decision too often. I make them with as much advice as I possibly can get. We just went through a process, for example. We asked the residents of a neighborhood for their advice about one particular element, and I think that's entirely appropriate. I think we certainly have advisory boards at Dogwood Pavilion, at Glen Pine Pavilion. They deal with the elements related to those facilities, very valuable facilities, but they don't deal with, for example, whether there's programming at Como Lake or programming at Lafarge Lake, or whether there's hiking in our trails, or whether there's the appropriate businesses in our community to serve our needs as an aging population. So I think that both of those organizations could end up with members on an advisory panel, but I don't think that that's necessarily something we need to design here. I think staff have done it before. They've come back with outstanding recommendations related to this kind of question when we put it to them, and quite often we adopt those recommendations completely, and we then move forward. And quite often we reject them, or the recommendation is that we not do this. I'm fully prepared to let staff come back and discuss with us the range of possibilities on a seniors advisory council or body, so that council can continue its role of trying to make Coquitlam as age-friendly as possible. I think we've gone a long way, but we still have a lot of work to do to continue to make us both age-friendly, disability-friendly, a community that really welcomes the people as they are, and for that matter, the wide range of cultures that we have here, and make sure that we're friendly and welcoming and inclusive to those. We have a committee actually on that, and actually Councillor Reamer is the chair of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee, because we can get advice from people of many cultures as to what the barriers are, and we can get advice from seniors as well about what the barriers are to them reaching their full potential right here in our community. So I'm going to support the recommendation to have staff come back to us with some thoughts on the subject. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. I seconded this motion, and our committee's appointments are coming to end, and we'll be looking at reappointing new committees in the new council. And I know Councillor Robinson had indicated when I seconded this motion that this was to go to staff to come back within a couple of months for the new council to be dealing with. This wasn't to be decided before then. And so it will fit quite nicely with the ending of our committees and the reappointment. It may be a little bit later than some of our committees and reappointments in the new after the election, but it's going to work fine. And as Councillor Robinson said, I value the input and advice that we get. We don't take it always 100%, but it's good to have that advice and information to help us frame our decisions moving forward. And I think we value and have been for years in the city, committees helping council with issues of benefit to the city. We're looking at the baby boomers, the largest group of seniors moving forward, and how we manage and how they deal with that moving forward has a great effect on our community and our economy going forward. And having a committee to help the Glen Pine and Dogwood deal with a certain number of seniors that are within those areas. They're both full also. We want to outreach, just like we do other groups, to other seniors outside of that group to get them out, active, and involved. We know that it will help us reduce our costs moving forward in the future. It's outreach into a different group of people, a large growing group of people over the next 20 years. And I think this is an apt committee to help us as we develop our city's full range of programs moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Well, the concept of having input from the seniors is definitely a valid one. I'm just not sure that there's a real void right now. We do have different organizations and community groups that are providing us advice and support, and whenever we've had to, we've had ad hoc committees that have been formed for specific reasons if we wanted them to give input on something. The easy thing to do is always to say, well, let's get a staff report, but then of course we're just adding more work to staff, and we're always trying not to do that because we don't need them to go off and come back with another report and tell us whether or not we should have another committee. And then we've often talked about the amount of committees we have, because every time we establish a new committee, we're having more support for each committee, and that takes time, that takes money. And then the third thing that we always seem to have a problem with sometimes on our committees is what exactly is going to be on the agenda. And sometimes we're filling the agenda. So I'm curious as to what the specific issues. I know there's a general idea of the concept that we should have input for seniors, but what is the specific issue that we want them to actually advise us on? Because usually that's what we want. We have a specific issue that they're going to advise us on. And I do think that the timing is, we're going to, I would think, come post-election, we're going to analyze each one of the committees and see which one's most appropriate. We're going to determine how perhaps we want to have the standing committees organized, perhaps how we're going to have the committee structure set up, whether we're going to continue with councillors being chairs on committees or being representatives to committees so they can come and go as they need, and have a representative from the community chairing. There's a whole bunch of questions around what we're actually going to do, and I hesitate to send staff away and get them to do more work on another report before we have actually said we definitely are going to do this, and this is the issue that we want them to address, and this is why we're moving forward on that. And I think we can get advice from our Dogwood and our Glen Pine and some other groups that are very willing to step up the plate if we had the specific issue. So although I didn't second Councillor Sikora's recommendation that we should, as he would call it, table it, I don't think it's inappropriate to say, no, maybe now is not the time to be asking staff to do this report. Maybe we don't need them to come back with a report this time. We can wait until after the election and see what that council feels are their priorities.
Thank you. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. Well, I plan on being a very active senior, and
in a couple of years, right?
And I think I'm only 2 years away from being eligible to collect my pension. Jeez. So maybe we're ready, maybe we're not. But I want to hear back from staff. I thank Councillor Rimmer for bringing this forward. We have a huge portion of our population that I think, again, sure they have boards at Dogwood and they have boards at Pine Tree, but I think they're underrepresented at the decision-making level in our city. And there are things in our city that we need advice on for age-appropriate decisions that we have to make. I think, I've heard it around this table here already, it's been mentioned that when staff goes out and comes back with a report, it will be comprehensive and they will have done their due diligence, and I look forward to, if this passes, to hearing from staff and just and getting a feel for how our seniors feel about having a seniors council. So I support this, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Well, I'm never going to be a senior. I'm perpetually 38 and have been for several years. We get seniors advice. We're rather a sophisticated city in some of the ways that we do business. And we get advice from Dogwood, from Glen Pine, from Bylaw. We have Leisure and Parks, which has cultural services. We have sports. And of course, we have members from the senior games here tonight, so we get information back from them. The multicultural committee has different cultural groups, and seniors are represented there as well. We have the accessibility committee, and seniors' needs are reflected there as well. Councillor Nicholson sits on the Community Fraser Health Board, which of course addresses senior health issues to some way. And then we get down to where in the United States, when I moved away from here down there was something called the AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. And if you want to see an organization, that is an organization that represents everything. And as Councillor, one of my lady friends, Robinson or Reamer mentioned, that they have moved into Canada now with the Canadian Association of Retirees. So all of those things are well and good. And maybe this city doesn't need to have something for everyone. Maybe we need to let CARP, if that's what it's going to be called, get up and running and see what they can do for it. I like the idea of going out to the seniors and saying, hey, this is what came up at council. What do you think? I don't have a problem doing that. But the timing just isn't right this month. I think perhaps we could just put this off and do it again after the election, and that council can choose whether to go forward or not. But I don't think seniors are being ignored in this administration at all. Maybe there are things we could do better. I don't know if we can or not. But I just think that we need to delay it and not put staff through this right now in case the next council that comes along doesn't see that this is the way they want to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a motion?
Yeah, I wanted to move a motion. I didn't want to speak a second time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I don't know exactly where to refer it to. I don't want to table it because I don't think it's appropriate, but I think we should refer it to a committee or something after the election. I'm not saying that we should not think about this, but I don't think that we should be voting on it today. I don't think we should be sending our staff off on doing the day. Sports and rec, I'd be happy with, sure, sports and rec. And the other thing I was going to say is I've frequently been told we're definitely not underrepresentative of the senior citizens around the council table anyway.
I wasn't going to point at anyone in particular, and I don't think you were either. Okay. So the motion, I'll take it as a motion to refer to Sport and Rec.
I'll second that.
Sport, Rec and Culture for them to address the question at some time in the future. That's been seconded by Councillor Robinson, and Mr. Gilbert has a concern.
No concern, just before we proceed to debate the proposed motion, to be clear that it's a meeting of the Sports and Rec Committee after November 19th.
Yes, got it. Okay. So the committee, because the committee that represents sport and recreation issues, the standing committee that represents sport and recreation issues after the November 19th. That's the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, we're going to move to Councillor McDonnell. Councillor Reamer had her microphone pushed before the motion, so I know it's not on the motion. I'm going to go to Councillor McDonnell first, then Councillor Reamer.
The reality of this is it's not going to come back before the election anyways. And this motion is kind of silly because it's not going to come to Parks, or it's not going to come to the Rec Committee until after the election anyways. So the same argument that you put forward about not binding a future council to this, you don't want to bind the next Recreation Committee to this as well. So my question to staff is, would this be able at all possible to come back before the election? Or would you expect this to be coming back after the election sometime when...
There is one more Sport, Rec and Culture meeting prior to November 19th, and that is scheduled for October the 24th. It wouldn't be possible at this time to have a written report prepared for that, but there could be a verbal discussion at that date at the will of the chair, and obviously the chair has to manage the agenda and how much time it's there. Realistically, an important issue like this, staff should do their work, and particularly considering that the motion includes reference to the Tri-Cities area. It would involve some consultation with our neighboring municipalities. So I think to do justice to this issue, we wouldn't really be able to bring anything back until the new year.
Thank you. In fact, for clarification, the motion also references a recommendation, so I can't imagine a verbal discussion would constitute a staff report with recommendations. So we're probably not looking until the new year anyway. So I'm not sure what the effect of the motion would be, other than to perhaps bind the next council to not having one, because I don't know that they have the information before they appointed standing committees. Are you done?
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I was just going to let everybody know that CARP has actually requested to be a part of this, whatever we determine to have. And so that would be the concept, is that you won't, I agree, there are advisory boards at Glen Pine and at Dogwood. However, they advise with matters pertaining to their buildings. And I'm looking at something a little bit more global. And I also wasn't expecting anything to come back until the new year either. And so that was the whole idea. This is simply a motion to ask staff to look into it so that they can come back to us at a later date with a report and a written report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reamer. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. You know, we have Glen Pine, we have a Dogwood.
On the motion to refer.
And we have a Millardville, also people in Millardville. You know, we have enough seniors that are advising that serve on boards and everything else.
On the motion to refer.
And I'll tell you, frankly, Mayor, what I'm really upset is the fact is, you know, every darn couple weeks, there's something new coming up for another committee. So you might as well dispense with the mayor and the council and have these committees meet and run the city. Why have elected body? Why go through elections even? So, you know, I'm not going to support this tabling, because I'll tell you what, there's election coming up. Who knows what happens in election? There might be a total change of the way we do business here in the city. A total change in committees, total change on a whole lot of things. And I think we better wait till the new election is on and the new people are sworn in, and whoever they may be, they want to go in a different direction. Thank you.
Just a clarification, this isn't a motion to table. You did move a motion to table, so I assume you would support that.
But that's been passed.
But this isn't a tabling motion.
We have a seconder, so.
Okay, good. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand the intent behind the motion to refer this. And so if I understand it correctly, it's to take this document, this request, bring it back to the next council, because theoretically it could be all new faces sitting around the table, and suggest that that group make the decision if they would like to look at this as a direction for the community. That's my understanding of the intent of the referral.
I took it to mean, and in fact there was reference to not binding someone, simply moving it to the next council at a committee level. I think it was possibly to have a discussion at committee level, but the discussion undoubtedly would be at the next council.
That the next council would discuss whether or not this was something that was on their particular agenda to address.
Yes.
And so I'm going to support the referral, because I think that I want to see it come back, because I think there's other options. Like I'm thinking about, you could do just a couple of focus groups to see, are there gaps? I mean, there's many different ways, and I think it needs really good discussion, but I'm not sure that we're the people that ought to be discussing it given the timing. And I want to make sure that, I want to make sure it doesn't fall through the cracks, that it does come back, but it comes back at an appropriate time. So I'm going to support the referral to have whoever's in our seats next month, I guess, that they would have the opportunity to have this full and rich discussion on this. Thank you.
Well, okay, and I'm going to take a completely different point of view, because the motion isn't to have a full and rich discussion. The motion is to have staff provide enough information so that whoever is at this table in a month and a half can have a full and rich discussion. So I don't think the tabling motion does anything other than put off the decision as to whether or not we get information about having a seniors council and what the matrix might be and how that be. So if we don't want to have a seniors council, we can make that decision now, and the next council could consider it again. All we're doing here, though, is the motion is not to have a seniors council. It's to ask staff to report back on the various models of seniors council, the various types of membership that might be involved in such a thing, and then that council will have enough information to make a decision. The motion to refer, though, is to decide not that we're going to have a seniors council or even that we're going to get enough information, but that we're going to move that whole discussion to somebody else so that they can decide whether they want more information about it. And I think that we just made a whole bunch of decisions on important matters because that's our job. That's our job. We don't abdicate our job in the last 6 weeks because there may be different people at the table. So I'm not going to support the motion to refer. I think our role here is simply to ask staff to to come back with further information so the next council can make a decision. Councillor Reid.
Well, maybe somebody actually better ask some of these groups that we have now if they see a need for a seniors council.
Yep.
And this is not a little package of work for staff. This is a huge package of work for staff. And I don't know about you, but the departments that I work with are sort of up to about here, and we're not hiring more staff, and this is just a huge, huge jump. My reason for suggesting that it go to Leisure and Parks is perhaps then to have a discussion at that committee. They can discuss with some of the staff members. Maybe someone could make a cursory discussion with some of the groups that we already have now, if this is the kind of thing they'd like to do. And, you know, I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill here, but I am not at this point in time, with the staff load that the departments I work with more, they just can't handle this. This is a big piece of work. So I really think we need to talk to the groups that we have now. Is this something they're interested in doing? And if it is, then we go ahead with all the work, and if it isn't, then we don't. So however you want to handle it, Mr. Mayor, but that's where I am. Thank you.
Well, I think we'll handle it by having a vote on the motion to refer. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to refer it to the next council's standing committee that deals with sport and leisure. All in favor? All opposed? That motion actually carries. There I see 4 opposed. Councillor Reamer, Councillor Asmundson, Councillor McDonnell, and myself are opposed. The motion carries. The motion has been referred to sport and leisure in December or January. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Item 14 is the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief. We have our representatives available to respond to questions of Council, and the recommendation is that Council receive this brief for information.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Lynch. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask our representatives if you could just provide some brief comment on the RGS conversation that happened at the table around the Western Plateau Golf Course and riparian areas.
Sure.
I noticed, so that would be really helpful. Thank you.
There actually was some questions asked again, because once again, I don't know that a whole bunch of the reps at Metro Vancouver ever understood. The exasperation in your voice was exasperation in my voice there too, because you could explain it over and over and over again, and I don't know that everyone was listening. I think some people were listening, and they clearly understood it. The question came up again at regional planning, and it came up at the board as to what we were asking for, and so it was explained again, and I think everyone came to an understanding that the goal here was to protect the land. There was no question ever of the land not being protected, and that in fact we are now reverting to a land use protection that is afforded to some other golf courses, but not all golf courses. And Councillor Sikora has.
The fact that, the Westwood Plateau people came forward, wanted a 2/3 majority vote at the board. That's when I was involved. And notice motion was served here, and the consultation was passed, went to the board. I don't know, I have not got idea whether that's already instilled in a new agreement or not, because they said it may take a little time to get it done, but I told them that I'd hoped that it came aboard before the election of the new board, to make sure that it is 66 and 2/3 that will be saying, yes, we want to support that golf course to remain there forever and a day.
Were they specific at all about timeline?
The timeline, I was pushing it to get it done before the election, before this November 19th.
Great, thank you.
And I don't know whether it's being held up or not, but I will be there on Wednesday. I'll be asking that question. Thank you.
Can you report back?
Mr. McIntyre.
I can report back, yes.
If we could just...
McIntyre may know a little more about it.
We can clarify on the timelines. Mr. McIntyre has just completed a report that will come to Planning Committee next Monday, and that report will give a fulsome discussion on the issues. In short, Metro has referred this out, as they have to by their founding legislation, to all member municipalities for a 30-day consultation period. Within that 30 days, everybody has to give their views. Our views are, because we asked for it, of course, we're supporting it, and we're going to ask that council that very night endorse the planning committee's recommendations so that we meet the 30-day window so that the board can deal with it before the election. That is the timeline that we're all marching to.
Right, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre, anything? Nope. No. Okay. Seeing no other comments, the motion is to receive the board and brief. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Reid.
I'm for around the table.
Okay. Go
Are
ahead.
you there yet?
Well, we have no further items on the agenda, so
Okay, well, it's no secret that I'm a critter lover, and I had spoken to Mr. Susak last week about the bear disposal because I'm quite concerned about it. I'm very upset that we're killing so many bears. I guess I'm not as learned as the people who work in the conservation office, but it seems to me that this is just getting to be a bit much. Mr. Susak kindly gave me a name of who in Victoria looks after the bear disposal, and hopefully he'll be able to speak with us tonight. But what I'm concerned about is that when the bears are disposed of, they're disposed of in whole, because I've been getting calls from people asking me the very questions if parts of the bears are being sold. And I don't know the answer, and I don't know how to find it. So if I could, Your Worship, I would like Mr. Susak to let us all know, because I don't know what else to say.
Thanks, Your Worship. We've been in contact with the Conservation Service, and they have told us that they dispose of the bears in essentially three ways. One, they cremate them from time to time, depending upon the condition of the body. Two, they will take it to the wild, essentially return it to a wild state and drop the body at some location that's only known to them. They have also given bears to Aboriginal communities for use by the Aboriginal communities, principally hides, for example. Those are the three methods that they have told us that are involved in their disposal. We will pursue them for some written information, some formal written information, so we can forward that to members of council.
Thank you. And I have asked for something in writing from the province with respect to this, because I think we're supposed to be an evolved society now, and I don't think there's a lot of these things we need to be doing. But thank you, Mr. Susak. I appreciate that. Thank you.
well, I'll tell you the implication of your question is frightening, and I'm glad we're going to get something in writing, and I hope it's something that will be somewhat definitive as to whether or not there is another issue that might be causing or affecting the decisions as to how bears are dealt with when they're found in garbage. I would happen to spend the morning at Summit Middle speaking with the principal and dealing with elements of that one, and that was frightening that conservation seemed to have no other tools in its repertoire but to shoot the mother and put the children in, put the cubs in some kind of rehab.
That is unacceptable to me. That's what a mom's supposed to do, is protect her babies. The other thing that people are phoning about, I guess I get these calls because I'm sort of the critter person, but where are the $500 fines we're supposed to be getting out for people who aren't picking up the fruit, who aren't putting garbage out properly, who aren't doing all those things, and the attractants? And so that's another thing Mr. Susak will come back to us on, because if we need to, that's what we need to be doing to protect some of these animals.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you noted, we have no other formal items on the agenda, and if there are no other round-the-table items,
Entertain a motion. Councillor Rasmussen moves adjournment. Seconded by Councillor Robinson. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. This is actually the last one, is it, I think?
It is indeed.
Okay. Council has adopted, this is the last question period. Council has adopted a policy that question period is suspended for the 30 days prior to an election, and there are some historical reasons why that's the case. So this is actually the last council question period, prior to, I guess, December. So we'll open the floor to questions on tonight's agenda. Questions are maximum 2 minutes. Anybody with a question on tonight's agenda? Anybody? Seeing none. Oh, Andy, come on forward. State your name and address for the record.
3080 Plateau Boulevard. You can find it on the city website.
Andy Shen.
My question for council is, do you know what are the costs associated with having a committee? Like having a new committee? I currently sit on the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee.
Yep.
And I would like to know how much exactly it costs towards our city budget per year.
Now, you have raised a question that council has wrestled with in the past because staff have occasionally reported to us the cost of having a committee. Who wants to wrestle and wade into that one? I'll go to Mr. Gilbert.
That wasn't a reluctant hand. It was.
No, yeah, you seemed enthusiastic. Yes.
It's a difficult question, and council has indeed asked that question because they consider carefully the value of establishing a committee, as you could tell from the debate this evening. And the reason the question is difficult is it depends on some ways the committee itself, the work plan that it sets for itself, the amount of staff resources that it seeks to go out and solicit information to bring back to the committee for its consideration. So I'm not sure we break down those numbers. There's a general support at a staff level. I could take a further look and get back to you directly outside of this chambers, but it's not cheap. Sometimes it's committees that involve themselves in looking at matters of some degree of technical expertise. You have to go out and get that information. So there is some cost involved from both a staff perspective. Not from a volunteer perspective. We're very pleased with what the advisory committee members bring and the knowledge that they bring to those debates, and they are volunteers, but there's a strong staff support cost that goes with it.
Is it possible to get a ballpark about how much it costs?
There actually was a staff report, I believe, about a year ago.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I would truly hesitate to give an estimated cost here. The issue is that some committees meet monthly, some meet bi-monthly, and some meet quarterly. They range across the makeup of the different committees. So it's certainly in the, I'll say tens of thousands of dollars, but I know that's not much help. But I couldn't give a more precise than that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And you can understand that if a meeting lasts 3 hours and the drafting of the minutes and the agenda for that is the 5 hours, is an entire staff day involved simply in the typing aspect of dealing with the meeting. And quite often it's much more than that, and the meetings are monthly, and so you're dealing with often a significant cost. We try to manage that cost as well as we can, and also we are very reluctant to set up committees unless there's a really key reason why we ought to be doing it. So.
And I think just in support of that, there's the clerk's office got the technical support from the business area that is the support to that committee. There's recruitment costs. Like it comes out in a variety of ways that seem you don't think of until you're actually involved in doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, Mayor, to me it's very, very simple. You'd have all these answers and the tip of your fingertips, so would all the council members, so would anybody else, if we went to zero-based budgeting, because that would be a line item for committees. That would be in a budget. This way, you'd never know. I don't know. You don't know. You'd be guessing. But if it was a line-by-line budget, a zero-based budget, you'd know exactly how much there is money to spend for these different committees. Mm-hmm. But we're not in that system.
Well, we kind of are, because the staff report that was requested, I think, by the notice of motion would have undoubtedly a financial implications section at the back, as all staff reports do, and it would have had a number there that said, if you establish this, you pretty much have to budget $8,000 for the staffing costs and the advertising and recruitment and those sorts of things. So we do have those elements, particularly when we set up new committees. So.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I thank you very much all for coming. I certainly thank the Coquitlam Youth Council for sitting through the entire meeting. I know at least one of them said he wants to be mayor, and come on up.